Are you sure you want to answer this one, Jasmine? It's quite complicated. Miss Stevens chuckled as she glanced around the classroom, her eyes landing on Jasmine. The class burst into a chorus of low giggles. Jasmine's hand was still raised, her fingers trembling slightly, but her resolve was unshakable. She was used to being underestimated, used to people doubting her abilities simply because of her skin color, her quiet demeanor, and the way she often kept to herself. But today, something was different. Jasmine wasn't going to shrink back. She wasn't going to let the mocking smiles and dismissive glances get to her. She was going to prove them all wrong. Yes, I'm sure, Miss Stevens. I want to solve the problem. The classroom fell silent as Miss Stevens glanced at her, the smile on her face faltering for a second. Jasmine could feel every eye on her, the weight of their judgment pressing down, but she kept her head high. She could do this. The problem on the board was a complex algebraic equation that no one else had even dared to attempt. The class was in the middle of a high-pressure exam, and Miss Stevens had decided to throw in this problem as a final challenge to see who would rise to the occasion. She had no intention of letting Jasmine solve it. "All right, Jasmine," Miss Stevens said with a patronizing tone. "Let's see if you can do it." The room watched as Jasmine slowly made her way to the front of the class. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she steadied her breathing and focused on the task at hand. As she stood in front of the chalkboard, she could feel their eyes boring into her. Jasmine took a deep breath and started writing, each step of the equation coming together in her mind as she went. With every calculation, the classroom remained eerily quiet, the only sound the soft scratch of the chalk against the board. Jasmine didn't look up. She didn't care what they thought. She only cared about getting it right. Miss Stevens crossed her arms, her expression a mixture of skepticism and amusement. "You know, Jasmine," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "it's okay to admit when something is too hard. You don't have to do this just to impress everyone." But Jasmine didn't flinch. She kept writing, her movements fluid, confident. The equation was no longer just a problem on a board. It was a battle, and she was determined to win. As she neared the end of the equation, the room grew tense. Miss Stevens stood, her gaze fixed on the chalkboard, her lips curling into a smirk. She couldn't believe it. How could Jasmine, of all people, possibly solve this? "Are you done?" Miss Stevens asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. Jasmine finished the final step, stepped back, and looked at the solution. She smiled to herself, a quiet, satisfied smile that no one saw but her. She had done it. She had solved the problem. "Yes, I'm done," she said softly, turning to face the class. The room was silent. The students looked from Jasmine to the equation on the board, their eyes wide in disbelief. No one said a word. Miss Stevens' smile faltered as she walked toward the board, her expression changing from amusement to surprise. She scanned the solution, her brow furrowing. There it was, the correct answer. I can't believe this," Miss Stevens muttered under her breath. Jasmine stood tall, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had earned this moment. "I told you I could do it," Jasmine said quietly but firmly. The class remained silent, the shock settling in. Jasmine had done what they never thought possible. And in that moment, she knew she had changed something. She had proven to herself, and to everyone in that room, that she was more than just a quiet girl in the back of the class. She was capable, and she was going to show the world just what she could do. The classroom remained eerily still as Jasmine stood by the board, her gaze unwavering from the solved equation in front of her. Miss Stevens had yet to speak, and the silence between them stretched out like an eternity. Jasmine could feel the weight of the moment, every eye in the room fixed on her. Her heart was racing, but her breathing was steady. This wasn't just about solving a math problem, it was about proving something far bigger. It was about showing that she could rise above the expectations that others had for her, that she could break through the assumptions people made based on the color of her skin. As Miss Stevens turned slowly to face the class, Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't look at the other students. She kept her focus on the teacher, waiting for what would come next. "Well," Miss Stevens finally said, her voice tinged with a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. "You've solved it. You actually did it." The words were barely above a whisper, but they carried a weight that seemed to drop into the room like a stone. Jasmine nodded, her expression calm, though inside, a wave of satisfaction was building. She had done it, and now she could stand tall not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been doubted or underestimated. Miss Stevens cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the shift in power. "I'll admit," she said, still somewhat stiff, "I didn't expect that. It's not just about the answer. It's about how you approached it. You've got potential, Jasmine." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Miss Stevens wasn't apologizing. She wasn't admitting she'd been wrong, but she was acknowledging Jasmine's ability. And that was enough for now. The class remained silent, watching the interaction unfold. Some of the students were still in shock. Others were slowly beginning to whisper amongst themselves, probably asking themselves the same question. How had Jasmine done it? For the first time, Jasmine could feel the shift. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't the girl who hid in the back of the classroom, waiting to be ignored. She had taken control of the moment, and she could sense the respect growing around her. Slowly, one by one, the students began to nod, to recognize the power of what had just happened. Miss Stevens turned back to the board, still processing the turn of events. "All right," she said, her voice regaining its usual authority. "I'll move on to the next problem, but this time I expect everyone to pay attention. Jasmine, great job. It wasn't much, but it was a start." Jasmine smiled to herself, the sense of accomplishment not just from solving the equation but from standing her ground, knowing that she had earned a space in this classroom. As the bell rang signaling the end of the lesson, Jasmine gathered her things slowly, taking her time as the class emptied out. The students didn't rush to leave. They lingered, perhaps still trying to process what had just happened. Jasmine walked out of the room, her head held high. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. She knew her worth. And with every step she took down the hallway, she felt a little bit more like the person she was meant to be. The next few days in school were different for Jasmine. The whispers and stares from her classmates hadn't stopped, but they had shifted. They were no longer whispers of doubt or ridicule. They were whispers of curiosity, admiration, and, for the first time, respect. She could feel it in the way her peers now looked at her in the hallways, how they hesitated before speaking to her, almost as if they were unsure of how to act around her. It was strange, but it felt good. Jasmine had spent so much of her life blending into the background, staying quiet and unnoticed. But now things had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. On the third day after the math problem incident, Jasmine was walking to her next class when she saw Miss Stevens in the hallway, talking to a group of students. They were laughing, but when Miss Stevens saw Jasmine approaching, her smile softened, and she waved her over. Jasmine hesitated for a moment, wondering what this might be about. She had heard some of the students talk about how Miss Stevens had been talking to her in the teacher's lounge after the class. They had all been wondering if Jasmine would keep up with the newfound attention, or if it was just a one-time thing. "Hey, Jasmine," Miss Stevens called out with an inviting smile. "Could you come over here for a minute? I wanted to talk to you about something." Jasmine felt her heart skip a beat. She wasn't sure what this could be about, but she walked over, her steps measured but calm. "Yes, Miss Stevens?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Miss Stevens looked around, ensuring no one was too close, and then turned to her. "I just wanted to say how impressed I was with what you did the other day," she began, her voice lower now, almost private. "You know, solving that equation? I didn't expect it. You've got a lot of talent, Jasmine, and I think it's time you started showing it. I've been thinking about putting you in the advanced math group." Jasmine blinked in surprise. She had always felt like she didn't belong in the advanced groups, like she wasn't good enough. But here was Miss Stevens, offering her a spot in one of the most challenging classes at the school. I didn't think I was ready for that," Jasmine admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure? I mean, it's a lot of work." Miss Stevens gave her a soft smile, a look of encouragement in her eyes. Jasmine, I've seen what you're capable of. You've been holding back, but you don't have to. You have a gift, and I want you to start using it. No more hiding in the back of the class, okay? You belong with the best. Jasmine felt a rush of emotions. She had always been the quiet girl, always hiding her talents, always staying out of the spotlight. But now someone believed in her. Someone saw her potential. And it was Miss Stevens, of all people, the very teacher who had doubted her not too long ago. It was a lot to take in, but it felt right. Okay, Jasmine said, her voice more confident now. I'll do it. I'll give it a shot. Miss Stevens smiled warmly, nodding. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I know you'll do great. As Jasmine walked away from the conversation, her mind was spinning. She was going to be part of the advanced group now. She was going to challenge herself, push herself further than she ever had before. And for the first time in her life, she felt ready. The next day, Jasmine walked into her advanced math class, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She took her seat at the back, but this time it wasn't out of habit. It was because she wanted to. She wasn't afraid to stand out anymore. And as the teacher walked in and began the lesson, Jasmine felt a sense of belonging. She wasn't just the girl who solved one hard problem. She was the girl who could handle anything, as long as she believed in herself. From that day forward, Jasmine didn't hide anymore. She stood tall, not just in math class but in every room she walked into. She knew who she was now. She knew her worth. As the weeks passed, Jasmine settled into her new routine in the advanced math class. At first, the challenges were overwhelming. The problems were more complex than anything she had tackled before, and there were moments when she felt like she was drowning in equations, formulas, and theories. But with each new concept, Jasmine found herself growing, pushing through the self-doubt that had always held her back. She started staying after class, asking questions, getting extra help from her teacher, and practicing late into the night. The hard work was paying off. Slowly but surely, Jasmine began to understand the material, not just by memorizing steps, but by grasping the deeper connections between concepts. She had a knack for making things click in her mind, something she hadn't known she possessed until she gave herself the chance to try. One day, during a particularly difficult lesson on calculus, Miss Stevens stopped the class and turned to Jasmine. Jasmine, she called, her voice full of quiet admiration. Could you come up here and explain how you solved this problem? Jasmine felt a wave of heat rise to her face. She hadn't expected to be singled out in front of the entire class, but the words felt different now. They didn't carry the sting they once did. She had earned this moment. Jasmine stood up and walked to the front of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. The eyes of the class were on her, but instead of feeling nervous, she felt confident. She had something to say, something worth sharing. She explained the solution to the calculus problem step by step, breaking it down for the class in a way that made it seem simple. As she spoke, she could see the students nodding, some of them even jotting down notes. When she finished, Miss Stevens gave her an approving nod. Thank you, Jasmine. That was excellent. You really have a talent for this, she said. Jasmine couldn't help but smile. It was a quiet smile, but it was full of pride. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when she finally felt like she belonged. After class, a few students came up to her, offering compliments and asking for help with some of the problems they had been struggling with. Jasmine was taken aback. She had always been the one asking for help, never the one giving it. But now, as she stood there talking with her classmates, she realized that things had changed. She wasn't just the girl in the back of the room anymore. She was a part of the class, a valuable contributor. The following week, Miss Stevens asked Jasmine to be a tutor for some of the other students. At first, she hesitated. What if she wasn't good enough to explain things to others? What if they didn't take her seriously? But then she remembered all the late nights, the struggles, and the breakthroughs she had experienced. She knew she could do it, so she agreed. It felt strange at first, sitting across from another student, explaining math problems that had once seemed impossible. But with each session, Jasmine grew more comfortable, more confident. She realized that teaching wasn't just about knowing the answers, It was about understanding the material in a way that allowed her to help others. It was a skill she hadn't expected to discover in herself, but now, it felt like a natural part of who she was. As the semester went on, Jasmine's reputation in the class grew. She wasn't just a student who excelled in math. She was a leader, someone who helped others and made a difference. Her classmates respected her, and she had earned the respect of Ms. Stevens too. But the most important change was the one that happened inside Jasmine. She no longer doubted her abilities. She no longer hid in the shadows, afraid of being seen. Jasmine had found her voice, and with it, she was ready to take on anything that came her way. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but Jasmine knew now that she was capable of handling whatever challenges lay in front of her. She had proven it to herself and to everyone else. As Jasmine entered her senior year of high school, things were starting to feel like they were finally falling into place. The uncertainty that had once filled her days had begun to fade, replaced with a quiet confidence. She had proven to herself and to everyone else that she was capable of much more than they had ever expected. Her reputation had grown over the past year, not just as a student who excelled in math, but as someone who was willing to help others, to lift up those around her. Students who had once ignored her now sought her out for advice, and she never hesitated to offer a hand. It wasn't just her academic success that made her proud. It was the way she had transformed into someone who was seen, someone who had a voice. But despite her achievements, there was still one part of her life where Jasmine felt unsure. Her future. The question that everyone seemed to be asking, "What are you going to do after high school?" lingered in the back of her mind. The pressure to know exactly what she wanted to do, where she wanted to go, was mounting, but Jasmine wasn't sure if she was ready to make such a big decision. She had always excelled in school, particularly in math and science, and there was a part of her that wondered if she could pursue a career in engineering or technology. But the thought of leaving her small town, leaving the comfort of everything she knew, filled her with a sense of dread. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of change. One afternoon, as Jasmine sat in the school library, buried in her homework, Miss Stevens walked by and stopped when she saw her. "Jasmine, do you have a minute?" she asked. Jasmine looked up, startled. "Of course, Miss Stevens. What's up?" Miss Stevens pulled up a chair and sat down across from her. "I wanted to talk to you about something. You've come such a long way, Jasmine. I've seen you grow over the years, and I just wanted to remind you of something important." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" she asked, curious. Miss Stevens smiled warmly. "I know you're uncertain about your future, but I want you to remember that you have the potential to go far. You're not limited by where you come from or by anyone's expectations of you. You have a gift, and I think you should consider applying to some top universities. Don't sell yourself short." Jasmine felt her heart race at Miss Stevens' words. She had never really considered applying to top-tier schools. The idea of leaving her town, of being surrounded by people who seemed so much more experienced and knowledgeable than her, was daunting. But Miss Stevens' encouragement hit her differently. For the first time, Jasmine realized that maybe she could do it. Maybe she didn't have to play it safe. Maybe it was time for her to take a chance. "I don't know," Jasmine said softly, looking down at her notebook. "It just seems so big. What if I don't fit in? What if I fail?" Miss Stevens leaned forward, her eyes full of sincerity. "Jasmine, I've seen you overcome so much. You've already proven that you can succeed when you put your mind to something. Don't let fear hold you back. You don't need to have all the answers right now. Just take the first step, and the rest will follow." Jasmine sat back, thinking about what Miss Stevens had said. The fear of failure had always held her back, but perhaps it was time to let that fear go. She had the potential to do more, to be more. She just had to believe in herself. That evening, Jasmine sat down at her desk, her laptop open in front of her. She began to research universities, looking at schools she had once thought were out of reach. As she read through the programs, the application requirements, and the possibilities, a spark of excitement began to grow within her. Maybe this wasn't as impossible as she had once thought. Jasmine realized that the path to her future wouldn't be easy, and there would be obstacles along the way, but she was ready. She had faced doubts before and had come out stronger on the other side. This would be no different. The next day, she made a decision. She would apply to those schools. She would take the leap, and whatever happened, she would know that she had given it her all. The weeks that followed were filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety for Jasmine. She had taken the leap, submitting her applications to the top universities she had once thought were out of her reach. Now all she could do was wait. The uncertainty of it all was overwhelming at times, but Jasmine had learned to cope with it. She had faced bigger challenges, and she knew that no matter what the outcome, she had done something incredible just by applying. As she walked through the hallways of her high school, she noticed something had shifted. There was a new level of respect from her peers. They no longer saw her as just the quiet girl in the back of the room. Jasmine had earned their admiration, not just through her academic achievements, but through the way she had transformed herself. She had found her voice, and it had resonated with everyone around her. One afternoon, as Jasmine was walking to her locker, she was stopped by a group of students. At first, she thought they were going to ask for help with a math problem, as they often did. But this time, it was different. "Hey, Jasmine," one of the girls, Emily, said with a smile. "I just wanted to say, you've really changed things around here. You've inspired a lot of us. I don't think I've ever seen someone like you just go for it like you did. It's amazing." Jasmine blinked, taken aback. "You've been inspiring us all," another student, Tyler, added. "We all thought you were just quiet, but you've shown us that we can do more than what people expect." Jasmine's heart swelled with gratitude. She had always struggled to be seen, and now, in this moment, she realized how much her actions had impacted those around her. "I didn't think I was doing anything special," Jasmine said, her voice soft but sincere. "I just did what I had to do, but I'm glad it helped." Emily nodded. "It definitely did. You're a role model for us now, Jasmine. I think we're all going to start taking more chances, just like you did." Jasmine smiled, her cheeks flushing with warmth. "Thank you. That means a lot to me," she replied. After the conversation, Jasmine felt a sense of pride and humility wash over her. She had never set out to be a role model, but the impact she had made on her classmates was undeniable. She realized that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be yourself and take the leap when the opportunity arises. The next few weeks passed in a blur of anticipation. Jasmine continued her studies, tutoring other students, and preparing for the next chapter of her life. Then, one chilly afternoon in late February, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a notification. She picked it up, her heart racing as she saw the email subject line, "Admission decision, university name." She opened the email, her hands trembling as she read the words on the screen. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to university name for the fall 2024 semester." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, unable to process what she was reading. She had done it. She had been accepted to one of the top universities in the country. The years of hard work, the late nights, the doubts, and the fears, all of it had led to this moment. Jasmine sat down on her bed, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. She had made it. She had achieved something she had once thought was impossible. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Ms. Stevens. "Congratulations, Jasmine," the message read. "I knew you could do it. You've worked so hard, and I'm so proud of you. Enjoy this moment. You've earned it." Tears welled up in Jasmine's eyes as she read the message. The pride in Ms. Stevens' words made her feel like she was on top of the world. Jasmine had always doubted herself, but now, she knew she was capable of achieving anything she set her mind to. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Jasmine felt ready for whatever came next. She was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had taken the first step, and now there was nothing standing in her way. As Jasmine prepared for her final year at high school, everything seemed to fall into place. Her acceptance into one of the top universities had opened a new chapter in her life, one filled with both excitement and a bit of apprehension. She was ready to move on, but she also felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The past few years had been a journey of self-discovery, one that had shaped her into someone she no longer recognized. The shy, quiet girl who had always been afraid of standing out was now someone who embraced challenges and pushed through her fears. Still, as the summer days slipped away, Jasmine couldn't shake the thought of leaving everything behind. Her hometown, her family, the comfort of the familiar. It was all about to change. And though she was excited about the future, part of her couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. One evening, just before school was about to start, Jasmine sat in her room, staring at the acceptance letter from the university. She had been accepted to study engineering, a field she was passionate about, but also one that intimidated her. The idea of competing with students who had been preparing for this their whole lives was daunting. Am I really cut out for this? She thought, her fingers tracing the edges of the paper. She had worked so hard to get here, but now that it was real, doubts crept in. What if she wasn't as good as she thought? What if the challenges were too much for her to handle? It was in that moment of uncertainty that her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ms. Stevens. I was thinking about you today. The message began. You've come so far, Jasmine. Don't let fear stop you now. You're ready for this. Trust in yourself, and don't forget, you're not alone. I believe in you. Jasmine smiled softly as she read the message. The words were just what she needed to hear. Miss Stevens had always been there for her, a constant source of encouragement and guidance. Her belief in Jasmine's abilities had pushed her to where she was today. And now, as Jasmine sat there, staring at the letter once more, she realized that Miss Stevens was right. The fear she was feeling was normal. It was part of the process. She didn't have to have it all figured out right now. All she had to do was take that first step into the unknown, just like she had done so many times before. With renewed confidence, Jasmine began making preparations for her move. She packed her bags, carefully selecting the things she wanted to take with her, knowing that some things would have to stay behind. It wasn't just about the physical items. This was her first step toward independence, her first step into a world that she had always dreamed about. Her parents were proud of her, but also a little nervous. They had always been her support system, and now they would have to let her go. As the day of her departure drew closer, her mother pulled her aside. I'm so proud of you, Jasmine, her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. But remember, no matter where you go, you'll always have a home here. We love you. Jasmine's eyes welled with tears as she hugged her mother tightly. She had always felt the weight of her family's sacrifices, and now it was time for her to take that next step. When the day finally arrived, Jasmine stood at the front door, her suitcase in hand, ready to leave. Her parents were there, giving her one last hug before she left for the university. Jasmine felt a mix of excitement and sadness, but she knew it was time. As she climbed into the car that would take her to her new life, she took a deep breath, letting go of all the fears that had once held her back. The future was waiting, and she was ready to meet it head-on. It wasn't just the start of a new chapter in her education. It was the beginning of Jasmine's new life, one where she would continue to grow, learn, and push past the limitations she had once placed on herself. And as the car pulled away, she couldn't help but feel that, no matter what came next, she was ready. This was her moment to shine. As Jasmine settled into her new life at the university, the changes were overwhelming. The campus was vast, with towering buildings and a sea of unfamiliar faces. She had left behind everything she knew, her family, her town, and the comfort of being surrounded by people who had always believed in her. Now, she was on her own, navigating a world that felt both exhilarating and intimidating. The first few weeks were filled with long lectures, late-night study sessions, and moments of doubt. Jasmine found herself questioning if she truly belonged in this space. She was surrounded by students who seemed to have everything figured out. Students who had attended prestigious schools, who spoke with confidence, and who appeared to be thriving in this new environment. Jasmine, on the other hand, felt like she was constantly trying to catch up. But she refused to let those doubts hold her back. She had worked too hard to get here. She remembered the moments of struggle in high school, the times when she thought she wasn't good enough, and how she had pushed through those feelings. This was no different. Slowly, Jasmine began to find her rhythm. She discovered that it wasn't about being the smartest in the room. It was about being persistent, asking questions, and knowing that she was capable of learning. She joined study groups, made new friends, and found mentors who guided her along the way. One evening, after a particularly challenging math exam, Jasmine sat in the library, feeling defeated. She had studied so hard, but the exam had been harder than she anticipated. She stared at her notes, feeling the weight of the uncertainty creeping back. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, she thought, her mind racing. Just as she was about to pack up and leave, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ms. Stevens. Jasmine hesitated for a moment before opening it. I know you're facing challenges right now, but remember, Jasmine, this is where growth happens. The best things don't come easy. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Keep going, and don't doubt yourself. Reading those words, something shifted in Jasmine. The doubt that had started to settle in her chest began to dissipate. She wasn't alone. She had come so far, and she wasn't going to let one difficult exam define her. With a renewed sense of determination, Jasmine took a deep breath and stood up. She couldn't afford to let fear or doubt take over. She had worked too hard to get here. The next few weeks were filled with progress. Jasmine's grades improved, and she began to feel more at home in the classroom. She found her passion for engineering growing stronger as she dived deeper into her coursework. The more she learned, the more confident she became in her abilities. But it wasn't just about academics. Jasmine had started to develop friendships with her classmates, and she felt a sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in a long time. The isolation she had feared was slowly fading. One afternoon after class, Jasmine met up with a group of friends she had made in one of her study groups. They were sitting on the steps of the main building, chatting and laughing, when one of her friends, Emma, turned to her. Jasmine, Emma said, I just wanted to say, you've been such an inspiration to me. You're always so focused, so determined, even when things get tough. It makes me want to push myself harder. Jasmine blinked in surprise. Me? I didn't know I was inspiring anyone, she said softly. Emma smiled. You are. You've shown me that it's okay to struggle, but it's also important to keep going, to keep pushing through. I'm really glad we're friends. Jasmine's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time in her life, she realized that her journey wasn't just about proving herself to others. It was about inspiring those around her, too. She had gone from the quiet girl who hid in the back of the class to someone who was leading by example, showing others what it meant to persevere, to keep going even when the road got tough. As the semester went on, Jasmine continued to grow. She faced challenges, but she met each one with resilience and determination. She realized that the fears and doubts she had once carried were no longer holding her back. She was no longer afraid of the future. She was ready for whatever came next. As Jasmine entered her second year at university, the weight of everything she had achieved began to sink in. She had faced so many doubts, so many moments when she wondered if she was truly cut out for this. But here she was, continuing to push forward, thriving in ways she had never imagined possible. She had earned a place among the best students in her field, and every day, she grew more confident in her abilities. Her engineering classes were becoming more challenging, but Jasmine loved the challenge. The more she learned, the more she realized how much she had always been capable of. It wasn't just about the grades or the accolades anymore. It was about the journey, the way she had transformed, step by step, into someone who believed in herself. One afternoon, Jasmine was walking across campus when she received a call from her mother. Jasmine, I just wanted to say how proud we are of you, her mother said, her voice filled with emotion. You've worked so hard, and we've watched you grow into such an amazing person. We knew you could do it, but seeing you do it, seeing you achieve your dreams, is something we will never stop being proud of. Jasmine felt her heart swell at her mother's words. She had always carried the weight of her family's sacrifices with her, and hearing her mother express such pride filled her with a deep sense of gratitude. Thank you, Mom, Jasmine said softly, fighting back the tears. I couldn't have done it without you. Later that evening, As she sat in her dorm room, Jasmine reflected on how far she had come. She thought back to the days when she doubted herself, when she felt invisible, and how far those days seemed now. She had made it through the toughest moments, and now, she was living the life she had always dreamed of. But there was still more to achieve, more to prove. Not just to others, but to herself. She wanted to do more than just succeed. She wanted to make a difference. As the semester continued, Jasmine began to take on more leadership roles. She became involved in student organizations related to her field, helping to organize events and mentor younger students. She found herself inspiring others, just as Ms. Stevens had inspired her. Jasmine realized that her journey was no longer just about her own success. It was about creating a path for others to follow. One day, while attending a conference for aspiring engineers, Jasmine met a young woman who was just starting her own journey. The woman, Sarah, looked up to Jasmine with wide eyes, full of admiration. "You've been such an inspiration to me," Sarah said. "I've heard about your story, how you came from a small town and made it into this program. It's incredible. I want to be like you." Jasmine smiled, her heart full of warmth. She had never expected to be a role model, but hearing Sarah's words reminded her of how much she had grown and how much further she could go. "You can do it too," Jasmine said, her voice calm but full of conviction. "Believe in yourself, keep pushing, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't. The path won't always be easy, but it will be worth it." As the years went by, Jasmine's journey continued to unfold in ways she had never imagined. She graduated with honors, and soon after, she landed her dream job as an engineer at a prestigious company. The road to success had been long and difficult, but every step had been worth it. She had faced every challenge with determination, and now, she was living proof that anything was possible with hard work, belief in oneself, and the courage to take risks. Jasmine knew there would always be new challenges ahead. There would always be moments of uncertainty. But she also knew that she was ready for whatever came her way. She had already proven to herself that she could overcome anything, and that was a strength that would carry her through the rest of her life.